Hey Zwifters, I'm Simon Schofield and this is the Zwiftcast. Coming up on this episode, 4 solitary seconds and decided only in the very final metres of a brutal climb. The winning margins at the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift were insanely tight. We discussed the event and the aftermath. Some are calling it the Simon switch. I cannot for the life of me think why. A big change for the Everest challenge. The Zwiftcast panel's eyebrows had to be scraped off the ceiling following some data from HQ on Zwifters' levels. Turns out the data was dodgy. We explain. Zwift is opening up its API. No, don't drift off. It's actually a potentially seismic change, and triathletes are the first to benefit. What does it all mean for the everyday Zwifter? And how do you get to be as amazingly successful as a club on Zwift as Sisu? Their founder reveals some secrets. Plus, all the latest Zwifty news and gossip. You ready, Zwifters? Here comes the Zwiftcast. Okay, let's crack on. We'll say hello to our Zwiftcasters in a few moments, but let's cut to the chase. And what a chase. The closest ever winning margin at any Grand Tour. It was truly a thrilling finish on Alpe d'Huez, and it capped a successful week for the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, an event that's central to Zwift and vital for women's racing. Dave Towle was there and sums up his thoughts.
I honestly had incredibly high expectations as I headed over to watch the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift a little over a week ago. The plan to fly into Amsterdam and get a train to Rotterdam couldn't have gone any smoother, and my first impressions upon arriving at the Rotterdam Central station were honestly pretty emotional. I have always loved bike racing my entire life, and one of the things I am just now realizing is, and it's also important to this story, is that I grew up during really one of the only eras when women's racing was shown something close to respect, that at least close to what the men's field received. And that was at the Red Zinger and Coors Classic in the late 70s and 80s. There were always competitive and robust women's racing. So as a kid, this was normal to me to see awesome women racing next to the men on similar courses. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it was much further ahead of the curve than what followed over really the next 30 years or so. That was clearly changing when I arrived at the train station there in Rotterdam, as the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift had absolutely taken over. Signage, displays, and even a stage where entertainers focused on the race, it was mind-blowing. No race, men's or women's, in the history of racing in the United States that I have seen, and that would include the Richmond Worlds or the Tours of California that I announced at, even came close to this kind of pre-race activation. It was such a good sign for what was to come. So arriving at the race hotel, it made me feel more like a kid than even a super fan at that point. I was so excited. If you didn't know if this was a men's or women's race, as you arrived and saw the vast amount of team staff, equipment, and infrastructure, the one thing that I bet most people would think was that they were at the biggest bike race on the planet at that moment. And that was awesome. The buzz was off the charts. And so many folks were desperately trying to imagine a storyline where somehow Demi Vollering would be challenged, and I remember quite a few conversations around the potential outcome over the next week. And for me, that has always been a big part of what makes racing so much fun, and high-end racing is great for that, unlocking imagination and passion. So the Zwift activations at both the Tour this year and the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift have been at Brewdog locations. Think kind of your classic American brew pub, to tell you the truth, but they do a great job, and it was awesome to see how Zwift and Brewdog have collaborated over this year, and I would imagine going forward to create a great gathering spot for friends, fans, and family, It works so well. I've really never seen any event with a better vibe. People are here for the right reasons. They love this race. They want women's racing to feel supported, and it feels really good. It really did when you were there in person, seeing it all come together in real time. At the helm of this race is the right woman for the job. To watch Kate Verna work is mind-blowing. She's simply classy, with amazing energy, great smarts, and really is the driving force and the engine that is Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. One of the biggest takeaways for me was not only how this event has improved the landscape for women's racing, but also the overall environment for women working in the sport across the board. This is the perfect example of how the high tide lifts all boats, and it's incredible to witness. So we had some serious fun as the first 3 stages were held. There were a few Zwift rides that had been set up. They were actually the exact ones in the livery for Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift that were going to be auctioned off later. So as people rode, we had bidons, hats, shirts for anybody who completed a short segment out on Watopia. We had some amazing folks come by as well, including stage winner and last year's best young rider. Well, the family, including the mom of Sabrine Cabrol, came by and rode. The World Feed commentator and former Zwift Academy winner Tanya Erath was there. So these were just a few examples. It would take me many minutes to list off all of the well-known people that came by and rode with us there at Brewdog. Absolutely a blast. All one needs to do to engage with the race is to see that it matters in a huge way to young girls. That's the biggest takeaway of all for me, was to see them wide-eyed, watching people riding on Zwift, talking about Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. Well, that really connected all of the dots for me. To say that this event had a compelling storyline is an understatement in a major way. There was more than enough heartbreak to go along with the unadulterated joy we saw all the way up to the Alpe d'Huez. If you've never read the speech by Theodore Roosevelt, I think it really applies here. The speech is called The Critic, and it talks about it is not the critic who counts, the man who points out how a strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. This speech really hits home when I look at people after the race talking about where was the winner's prize money compared to the men, or this race isn't long enough. I think at the end of the day, I'll be asking the women who raced these questions about the length of the race and listen to what all of my colleagues think out here, as we're clearly not done yet, but we have come an incredibly long way. And it's definitely time to acknowledge that.
A great piece, Dave, and there is not the faintest of doubts that women's cycling is on the up. Much of that thanks to Swiss sponsorship and other support in many other ways. Now, here's an example of how that translates to one of our very favourite metrics, bums on saddles. Zwift and ASO hosted a l'étape du Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift that finished on Alpe d'Huez. Now, Étape du Tour, for people who don't know, that is when all the amateurs get to ride a stage of the Tour de France. I've done 4 of them, and they are huge fun. The field for this one was over 1,400 people strong, and 40% of them, 40%, almost half, were women. The traditional l'étape has less than 10% female participation, and I have to say the ones that I was doing, spotting female riders was pretty rare. So 40% female participation. Something, Dave, is working.
100%, and it is so good to see it in real time happening. Simon, that 10% number is really interesting because I think that's very honest to what we saw up until really pre-pandemic. And then there has been a strong movement of getting women at events. I'm actually going to an event tomorrow that's called Rebecca's Private Idaho. That's a women-owned, women-directed event. Rebecca Rush, who's known as the Queen of Pain, it's her stage race she does, and they're pushing to get to 50%. And as you said, though, they're still not up to 40% women's participation. So this is one, I would think, of the top 5 metrics that I would look at for the impact that Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift is having. It's incredible to see all of those fresh faces.
Yeah, well, there's no hiding from bumps on settles. And the crowds, Dave, in Rotterdam were huge. Now, some say comparable to, or even whisper it, bigger than the men's Grand Départ. Very, very, very difficult to estimate crowd size unless you're an expert. And even then, as we see in American politics, the estimations of crowd size can vary. But well, what was your take, Dave, on the size of the crowd in Rotterdam compared, say, to the men's Grand Départ? Because you were at both events.
Yes, so in Nice for the finale and then Rotterdam for the start, it is comparable in some ways because a lot of folks in Rotterdam had been there for the men's depart that happened about 14 years ago. So that's almost comparing really apples to apples. And I would say, Simon, that the intensity of the crowd as you get within 250 meters of the epicenter of the start line, the finish line, it's really comparable, to tell you the truth. I mean, as you said, crowd estimates are a dark art. And when you talk with the police about, well, what's the police estimate? They're like, we don't have one. We aren't in the estimation business. So it is kind of one of the funniest ways that I've heard that you can determine crowd size is actually by using the human waste element. Weigh that, and you'll know exactly how many people from the portalets were at an event. It's incredibly accurate. But so that being said, forget the human waste part. Let's talk about the excitement, because the vibe in Rotterdam, that's the real story, is how upbeat it was. European crowds, Simon, as you would know, can be a pretty tough lot. Once you've got your spot on the fencing, they don't give it up. And then that goes back a couple of layers when you're close to where the good action is. It goes 2-3 deep that you can't even wiggle your way into a spot. So Rotterdam was exactly like that. If you were at the start, over those first 3 stages, it was 100% comparable, apples to the men's event.
Very encouraging. Now, however, there were some slightly negative but perhaps valid points raised by, amongst others, the highly respected cycling writer Jeremy Whittle, who writes for The Guardian, amongst other publications. Prize money for the men, the winner nets €500,000. The female winner took just €50,000, 10 times less. Now, Jeremy, I'm sure you're not listening, but if you are, one of the things that influences prize money is the amount of sponsorship. And in your reports in The Guardian, you never, ever, ever put the avec Zwift onto the title of the event. So, pot, kettle, maybe? Anyway, that was just a little rant of mine. But the prize money, Dave, by a factor of 10 is lower for the women. How is that going to change? I guess the short answer to that is time.
I 100% have spoken with the athletes about this. It applies to not just women's athletics, but truly cycling and coverage in general. You talk with Kasia Nieuwedoma or Puck Peters about whether they would like to see a little more prize money at the cost of coverage of the event, which is the biggest line item that you see when you're producing any of these big Grand Tour stage races. The day-by-day cost of the coverage is massive. Well, those women, their sponsors, the sport, all benefit from that coverage. And it was world-class coverage. Here in the United States, we watched on Peacock. We had former Zwift Academy winner Tanya Erath was one of the two, along with Anthony McCrossan, doing the coverage. They did a fantastic job. It was completely comparable to the coverage you see for the men's Tour de France. That is where the money needs to be spent right now. When we do get to a place where we've got a perfect world, the women will have equal prize money. And if Zwift keeps pushing as hard as they are, with intelligent people making fantastic decisions behind this event, you're going to see equal prize money, I would guess, within the next 5 years. But as you said, everybody needs to start rowing together.
Yeah. Very good answer, actually, Dave. And these things are never quite as simple as they look, are they? As you say, perfect world, equal prize money. But actually, you've got to get the coverage up. You've got to get the visibility up. You've got to get the sponsors' names on the jerseys, on the TV. That is in the end how in the weird financing of pro cycling, that is probably, as you say, how we are eventually going to get to equality of prize money. And finally, Dave, just on a slightly negative point, we didn't see the massive, boisterous, crazy, might I say, well-refreshed crowds on Alpe d'Huez that we're so used to in the men's race. That was a bit odd.
Well, or was it? Because I know that most people, when I was in Rotterdam, were anticipating that it wouldn't be a huge crowd, but the TV numbers would be good, and that came to be. The weather wasn't great. There's a little bit of sporting fatigue going on in France right now, or maybe even globally. I mean, we're coming off of an incredible tour, really great Olympics. I mean, I almost felt like the Olympics had their rebirth in Paris going forward. Boy, did sport need that. And then the women's Tour de France avec Zwift rolls out of Holland, where there's maybe the most intense and fervent support for cycling on the planet happens in Holland. And then going to a very remote location on top of Alpe d'Huez to finish in the most incredibly dramatic fashion you could imagine. So, yeah, the crowds were down a little bit, and I'm not going to sour grape that. I would guess if we ran this event 5 years from now, again, you'd see those crowds double.
Yeah. Well, excellent insight, Dave, from a man on the ground for both of the blue-ribboned pro cycling tour events of the year, and once more tribute to Zwift for putting the women's race up in that category as a blue-ribboned event in pro cycling. And well done, Zwift.
Right on!
Well, still on a climbing theme, let's talk about the Everest Challenge. Now, first of all, for new listeners, a little explanation is required. There ain't no gag like a running gag. And whilst I am always reluctant to be the centre of attention, the biggest and best running gag on the Zwiftcast is all about, well, me. I'll get some retaliation in first to set the context. I am user number 10 in Zwift. I was amongst the first ever non-Zwift staff cyclists to ride the platform. My first lap on Zwift was in November 2014. My video review of Zwift is going to be used by HQ as a benchmark date for celebrating Zwift's 10th anniversary quite soon. Those, dear listeners, are all things I did. One thing I didn't do was sign up for the Everest Challenge, and then I continued not to sign up for it, which means I never got the Tron bike. Still don't. Or when my fellow Zwiftcasters discovered this after I inadvertently let it slip quite some time ago now, they seemed to think it was funny, hilarious even. Oh, how they laughed. Zwift royalty, but no crown jewels, as it were, and you have never, ever, ever let me forget it, have you, Shane? G'day, mate.
Hello, Simon. Hello, listeners. I can't believe you beat me to the punch this episode. Usually it's us. We try and shoehorn this little joke in somewhere, but you've beaten us by explaining what's going on. Yes, it's hilarious. And I think, Simon, you also featured in my recent Zwift Roundup video as well. You got a mention because you didn't have the Tron bike. So no surprise to hear you still don't have the bike, but it will always be the running joke until you've done the time going up the climb.
Nathan, yo dude, by the way, listen, I worked out that in the meters I've climbed in Zwift, which, by the way, if you're interested, is over 200,000 meters. So, Shane, on your previous comments, you can stick that in your Australian pipe and smoke it. 200,000 metres. I could have had 4 Tron bikes. So, what's so damn funny? That's what I want to know.
Well, you just said it. You can have how many Tron bikes? And where's your Tron bike? What's going on here, Simon? So, I mean, when they have to do something in order, like, automatically for you that was so easy after so long, I mean, I don't know. Did they make this feature just for you, Simon? Was like that the whole point? Is this the Simon feature?
I think you're referring to what might be known as an idiot switch or an idiot button. Listen, I don't care. In my mind and in my imaginary Zwift carriage, I have 4 Zwift Tron bikes. That's all I care about. Jealousy, Eric, Slanger, Mr. Zwifty Cider, jealousy. You're all just jealous of my insanely low new user number. 10, by the way, in case anybody's forgotten. By the way, welcome.
Hello, Simon. Good to be here. And yes, I am jealous. I'll admit it. I'm jealous of your insanely low user number. As you know, I came to Zwift almost a year after you, so I'm just kind of a Zwifty spring chicken by comparison. So, yep. All hail user number 10, I say.
Anyway, listen, there is a point to all this nonsense, as astute listeners will no doubt have realised. HQ introduced something which some people are calling the Simon Switch, or maybe the idiot switch. Eric, what is this thing?
I think what happened was Zwift just got tired of hearing riders complain that they'd racked up a lot of in-game climbing before they discovered the Everest challenge. Because some riders, you may not believe this, Simon, but some riders actually want to complete the challenge and unlock this shiny Tron bike. So what Zwift has done is they've, if you haven't yet selected a challenge, they've gone in and they've automatically enrolled you in the Climb Mount Everest challenge. This way, your climbing will go towards the Tron bike automatically, unless you've already selected a different challenge, in which case it'll be going somewhere else.
But Shane, what if, rather sensibly like me, you don't want a silly glowing bike that's now as common as muck? You are now auto-enrolled for it. I would call this a destruction of rights.
Simon, how could you not want a glowing bike? Look, even My Whoosh released a Tron bike just last week. So even other competing platforms, they also want a Tron bike and are giving it to their users. Everybody wants a Tron. Everybody needs a Tron. Simon, I hear you still don't have the Tron.
So I'll draw a veil over that last question. So I assume you are approving of auto-enrollment on the Everest Challenge.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's one of those things where, and it's a running joke on Reddit as well, when somebody's doing the Everest Challenge, and they've actually chosen the Everest Challenge, and they're getting to like 8,000 meters, and they're like almost there, almost at the Tron, and it's actually 50,000. There's also an inside running joke on that as well. It's deep. It's deep, this inside jibes we have and jabs we give to people about the platform. But I'm glad it's the default. GP Sheepy, my alternate account, is enrolled and hasn't done a lot of climbing lately, but will eventually get the Tron, unlike you, Simon, who probably will never eventually get the... You haven't unrolled, have you? You haven't... It's complex.
But you know what this means, Nathan, don't you? You know what this means? The joke is comprehensively dead. Over. That's it. There's no mileage left in this, or meterage.
The joke is dead until I see a Tron bike. That's how long this one will never die, until I'm riding on Zwift with Simon, and we have a Simon's forced Tron bike party. I mean, that's like that is the ultimate group ride. I think at that point that's endgame for us, if that we actually have Simon in a group ride with his Tron bike. Then the joke is over, Simon.
Okay, challenge accepted. I'm not going to put a timeline on when completion might be.
Ride on!
Okay, let's get serious now. Zwift is finally opening up its API to selected parties. Now, partners, not parties, partners. I know not everybody understands the technicalities of that, but in short, it means HQ is going to grant access to outfits who can then work inside the Zwift technical ecosystem, or at least a bit of it, to enhance users' experience. In practice, that means what? Well, in the case of TriDot, used by a ton of Ironman athletes, it means their custom training programs for run and ride get sent to Zwift and show up in Watopia and elsewhere, meaning the session gets completed within Zwift with all its social frills and niceties, and then the session gets logged back to TriDot, where their very clever tech adapts subsequent sessions depending on progress, goals achieved or missed, injuries, all that kind of stuff. The process is not fully automated yet, but will be soon. Bit of an overcomplicated explanation, but basically, TriDot and Zwift now talk to each other and your TriDot sessions show up in Zwift, and then they get kind of ported back to TriDot. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, but you'd recognise it when you see it. Shane, almost as soon as Zwift launched, even in beta, people started asking for this API malarkey. And finally, 10 long years later, HQ has only gone and done it, although they're still very, very careful about who they work with. Why do you think it's taking them so long?
Oh, this is a difficult one. So from a security standpoint, opening up an API, giving people sort of insider access has to be very, very, very carefully controlled. So there's that side of it as well. But one thing I'll tag on there, you mentioned 10 years. There's a lot of legacy behind the Zwift architecture. I still believe they're working in files being sent to and from. Not everything is in the cloud just yet. So I'm guessing what they're doing with this new API is reworking that entirely, making things a lot more streamlined, a lot more automated, rather than copying a file down. I'm sure a lot of listeners have created a ZWO file and a text file and put it in the right directory and had that sync over. It's messy, and that's legacy ways of doing things. So I'm guessing what they're doing is making that a lot easier. And a lot more, I guess, documented would be a start for other companies to come in and do that. But also, it's a big shift. It's a big shift for other companies to hand off the control of the trainer, which they may have been doing in the past themselves, over to another platform. So, for example, let's just theorize that maybe TrainerRoad will be coming over. And I think TrainerRoad have posted that they'll be allowing imports somewhere online. Now, that takes away people using the TrainerRoad software and then going over to Zwift. So that's a big change for their business and their subscription model, possibly. There's a lot behind the scenes with this. Well, APIs are all behind the scenes. So we're just seeing as end users the tip of the iceberg, but I'm glad to see that iceberg just popping up. Just don't go past the Titanic, because there's a lot below this that could trip things up. So I guess that's what they're working on. That's why it's taking so much time.
Nathan, you're king of the API decisions at Zwift. Who do you let in and why? And what kinds of things would you like to see enabled?
Well, I think you let in people and organizations who will enhance the current platform, and you prioritize those who are closest to the heartbeat of what your customers or users desire. And there might be other motivations too, of like things that were currently being worked on with the TriDot thing or not, but people come to Zwift in order to train. Triathletes, I think, are a pretty good segment of those. And so I think this just kind of like made sense to let TriDot in the door first and work on some stuff that's very specific to a large swath of the users. The second question is, what things would I like to see? I mean, there's this question that we've had recently, and we talked a little bit about when you're a platform, you want to make sure that everybody who's on the platform is doing the things that they want to do on it and create the things that they want to do. Well, creating things, that's an API situation a lot of times, that where you have to share a little bit. And so there's tons of event organizers who just are really, really hungry for the ability to do awesome event organization thing. Event organization, the ability to create add-ons and plugins that have to do with streaming. There's so many different things that go on and on. But essentially, for the racing space, it's going to be event organizers and what they need.
Okay, Eric, TriDot is the first, and it's sort of a little limited at the moment, but Zwift have a history of doing new things slowly, so fine. Do you think this opens the floodgates, or will open the floodgates to more exciting stuff? Same kind of question to you, really. What kinds of things might we start to see? Is it just training?
I think it's just training in the short term. In the short term, this opens up a huge number of training possibilities. And it's not even that we're getting access to workouts or training plans that didn't already exist. It's just that this API brings them into Zwift on schedule, so you can do your rides and your runs more easily without messing around with multiple apps. And that's no small thing. So right now that it's confined just to workouts and your training data popping back to those partners. But talking to people within Zwift, they're definitely looking at the bigger picture with this API. They want to make it so partners, approved partners, can both feed and pull data to and from Zwift in different kinds of content. So for example, like you asked what I see, how this might work is maybe you have a zone 2 session scheduled in your training plan, and instead of just a boring 1 hour erg workout that Trainer Road sends over to you at 60% of your FTP, instead they go in and they look at upcoming events on Zwift, and they look at the current robo pacers that are running, and they recommend a few possible alternatives for you. Here's 4 different things you could do right now. Yeah. And it might even include some messaging on screen while you're doing that ride. Hey, try some high cadence stuff like those platforms often do when it's a zone 2 workout. Do some single leg workouts. They might kind of customize the messaging a little bit. Another example would be like if you have some intensity scheduled and a training partner, let's go with Exert this time for this example. They look at upcoming races and they recommend a few of them based on kind of the race profile, the race length, or they just look at routes. They look at different Zwift routes and they give you some recommendations for routes where you could attack the climb on each lap and get the kind of interval work in that's scheduled. There's a lot of possibilities there, and in talking to people at Zwift, that's the direction they're thinking, but they're not seeing it coming anytime soon. That's a lot of work that needs to be done on the partner's end, really, to make that work well and to be able to create content that really is compelling. But in the end, I'd say I just like the idea that Zwift is looking at really being the platform, being the container, and letting others create the compelling content. I think there's a lot of value there to be created.
But exciting, but not quite yet. I think it's probably the kind of up somewhere.
Yes.
I mean, as Shane mentioned, Eric, there will be kind of quite big things that we don't think about, business decisions based around this. I mean, for example, Zwift and Trainer Road. Do you think Zwift and Trainer Road will play nice with each other on API?
I sure hope they will. I think that Zwift should want Trainer Road integration, and I think Trainer Road should want Zwift integration. I'm actually using both of those platforms right now. I'm training multiple times a week, running Trainer Road and Zwift side by side. And if it was more seamlessly integrated, that would just make me a more loyal customer to both of the platforms. And so again, as I see it, I think Zwift does best when Zwift is the platform, the container. And I think it's the community and then partners like TriDot who can create the content. Zwift wants people to use the platform. They want subscribers who are staying on the platform, and those partners need people to pay for the content they're creating. So something like this API, that's a solution that lets both of those things happen. That keeps people on Zwift, keeps people paying for the content from the third-party partner. And I think we as Zwifters win with that because we get access to the best training plans available, but we get to execute them in our favorite virtual world. It's kind of like, it's like the virtual equivalent of moving to Girona, which you may be familiar with. It's like moving to Girona and being trained by a team of World Tour class coaches, but we're doing it all from the comfort of our own home.
A nice environment and a great training plan. And I mean, the mantra of Zwift at the moment is make things easy. Let's make life easier for Zwifters. And if you see the number of times that question pops up, how do I double screen Trainer Road and Zwift because I want to do my Trainer Road workout in Zwift? I mean, if it answered that question, it is going to massively improve that quite significant number of people's user experience who pay for both platforms, as you say. Yeah, interesting stuff. We will watch with bated breath for developments.
Right on!
Okay, let's do a Zwifty news roundup. We've not done one of those for a while. Runners on Zwift, poor things, I almost feel sorry for them. They get very few updates aimed at them, and as Eric Minna has made clear, the laser focus for HQ is cyclists. But Eric, the last update threw runners a tiny bone.
Yeah, Zwift created 2 new run-only routes, the Titans Run and the Epic Run. And they also added running badges to 8 existing routes in the game. So yeah, runners, they have a few more carrots to chase.
Do you feel sorry for them?
A little bit. But mostly just because they aren't riding bikes.
I was going to say, Nathan, sometimes I feel sorry for runners, but then I just say, well, dude, you forgot your bike.
Well, I mean, yeah, running, I as I've grown older, the fact that people just get moving, my judgment has waned little by little, but getting moving on the running, I don't know if you've ever been a cyclist that's tried to go over to running, you're not walking for a day or two, at least in my experience. So I probably am not going to be taking any action on my empathy or sympathy in that area in the Zwifty world.
Said it before, I'll say it again. Only run if chased, and then only with sufficient velocity to preclude capture. Sorry, runners. I don't really hate you. Well, the UCI, having moved on from dictating sock length, I mean, they will never get past that, will they? Never. Has announced a certification process for trainers for the eSports World Champs, not being held on Zwift this year. Sad face. Shane, what the hell is a certification process? What does it mean for the ordinary Zwifter, and does anybody care?
This is interesting. The UCI, just make sure you don't tilt your levers in too much on an angle, because you'll be too aero indoors as well. So just watch that. Look, when it comes to trainers and trainer hardware, we've always seen a bit of a wide gap between accuracy and responsiveness and how they perform. And when it comes to things like the virtual world champs, where it's a simulated world champs, I guess there's 2 realities, the physical reality and the virtual reality. They need to be equal and one and the same. When you push down on the pedals, that needs to transfer to the correct watts that you're doing into the trainer to then be converted to the virtual world, but that needs to be equal across the board. And we've seen that with the people having to use power meters as secondary resources or secondary references for their efforts. So with this, it's going to just bring trainers more into line. I welcome this. Absolutely I do, because it's going to make things a lot more even, fair, and then sport and fairness, that's obviously, it goes hand in hand. But with this, it's a difficult thing to do. Now, you'd think that on a trainer, it's indoors, it's a controlled environment. Measuring power indoors should be pretty easy because we don't have wind, rain, we don't have vibrations and things like that. But what we do have, though, are flywheel speeds, we have heat, and there's a lot of heat going somewhere. So all that energy that you're doing, your lunch from yesterday, is converted into heat. It's got to go somewhere, or noise, but our trainers are usually quiet now. But that then goes converted into heat, which then changes the electron, changes everything inside a trainer. And so they have to account for that. Doing all this testing is very, very time consuming. So to come around to answer the question, how is this going to affect the end user? Well, we end up with better equipment. But my concern is it's going to be more expensive. If it takes a few hours to recertify or certify every trainer, or recertify every time a new firmware comes out, that's going to push the cost of trainers up. And what we've seen lately is the cost of trainers come down. It bucks the trend of everything else in the world going up. Inflation, trainers are cheap now, which is great. So
yeah.
I'm torn. I want this, but I'm torn.
Yeah, it's that very expensive thing that you used to see on bikes. I think you still see them on bikes, actually. A little UCI sticker that has probably cost you, a few score of your currency unit of choice. I mean, would anybody care? Would anybody make a buying choice, do you think, if they were looking at 2 trainers and one was UCI certified and one wasn't?
Well, if you're going to be competing or trying to qualify for any of these high-level events, I'm sure that's going to be a requirement. That's the entry fee. That's going to be the gatekeeping. Because if you're on a wheel-on trainer that overheats and your watts go through the roof and you've got a crappy power meter that reads different left, right, you're not even going to get a ticket to the game. So these are going to be a requirement to enter the game, just as UCI certified, I think, frames and wheels for high-end UCI races or even club-level races. I believe they were checking UCI stickers at one of my races back in the day. So they're going to be a requirement. It's a good thing. My concern is around cost. I hope they can find a way to test these cheaply. And then the recertification with new firmware, because new firmware changes everything and can tweak the power. So, which is we'll see.
Okay, last bit in the Zwifty News Roundup. Eric, we hear that women's racing on Zwift already doing pretty damn well, actually, in the capable hands of James Bailey. Is going to get an even bigger push in September. What do you know?
James has been working pretty closely for months now with community race organizers, most of them women, to make changes to the women's racing calendar that will hopefully boost participation levels there. And he just announced that starting in September, he's rolling out a big slate of changes to that calendar. He's basically reducing the number of women-only race events, while also improving the kind of the quality of the events and the time slots that remain. And his whole goal is just to get more women racing in each category of each race. And a big part of that is just having the right amount of race events available. I'm actually publishing a post on this today that I just wrote over on Zwift Insider. So if you're looking for details, by the time you hear this, it'll be out on the site if you want to pop over there and look at all the schedule details.
That's the place to go. That's always the place to go for inside information.
Can I just throw in here something?
You may throw in. You may throw in, Nathan.
Well, so just real quickly, the idea, I think it's pretty cool, and you can see the focus that Zwift have on women's racing, which is really awesome to see. But essentially, rather than compete with these awesome series that are being put on out there, which we are actually highlighting one of them with Iceni and the Warrior Games and some upcoming stuff, but they are allowing the women's very passionate and awesome crew of organizers out there to take the reins and do more with it rather than compete with your community. And I gave a clap and a party emoji immediately to the post from James. Good work on him in, helping be a guide and a support structure for the community and not just try and compete with it with your own events, and highlighting their work and letting them get all that awesome benefit that they can get from putting on great events. I think it's really cool, and kudos to James Bailey for that.
Yeah, and as Eric said, Nathan, he's doing it in full consultation and cooperation with the women's racing community, which is obviously the way to go.
I should probably mention we should mention the Fem Cycle collab, because that's that's the women's community. That's the name that they've coalesced around. There's a very busy Discord server where they're chatting with each other and chatting with James and chatting with me. So Fem Cycle collab, there's a club in Zwift Companion that you can join, and all of the new racing events are kind of living underneath there, even though they're organized by different organizers.
Yeah. Good tip. Very good tip. Very encouraging stuff. A little bit of housekeeping from me. As you may know, we want to introduce a female voice on the Zwiftcast. It's long overdue. We are working on this, but it's taking a little bit longer than we expected, but we are on it. It will happen, and we hope to have some news within the next few weeks. Okay, correction corner. Last ep, we did a feature on how many Zwifters were at which levels, and we asked Zwift for some data. This they provided. The two big takeouts were that only 0.06% of Zwifters are in the elite level 100 and above club. Not hugely surprising, but interesting. And then the real shocker. Zwift told us 45% of all Zwifters were levels 1 to 10. We were staggered. Gobs were smacked. Eyebrows went into orbit. At this point, probably we should have challenged HQ on the data, because something just smelled all wrong. The inescapable outcome of the 45% number was that almost half of Zwifters were newbies, and in turn suggested a very high churn rate, meaning Zwift was not a sticky platform. Just counter to everything that we felt, really, and heads were duly scratched. So we did eventually return to HQ and say, are you sure, guys? They dug deeper and they found a database reporting issue. There'd been a glitch with the systems migration process. The 45% figure not only sounded wrong, it was wrong. The correct data shows that 10% of Zwifters are level 1 to 10. 10%, 1 in 10. Much, much, much more like everybody's kind of intuitive estimates. And to provide some reassurance that Zwift is actually a good deal stickier than the initial numbers suggested, the new data trawl showed 75% of Zwifters are beyond level 21, suggesting a high degree of perseverance from a good number of Zwifters. Caveats, these are July numbers when traditionally many Zwifters are outside. HQ think if we did this trawl in January, maybe 20% of Zwifters would be level 1 to 10 as new users pour into the platform. But arguably, January is as atypical as July. Anyway, weedy stuff. However, this is much, much, much more what we would have expected to see in the numbers, Eric.
For sure. That 45% number just didn't pass the sniff test, but 10% certainly does.
And 75% of Zwifters beyond level 21, there's always going to be a few who are going to try and go, no, not for me. But fully 3/4 of all engaged Zwifters, HQ word, but it means paying and active, have got into the promised land beyond level 20. That suggests stickiness, and even more so perhaps because we're in July, so maybe more than some Zwifters are out on a summer break and will be back. They could be level 21 plus, but just not active right now. It's stickier than those other numbers said.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially given the latest, the price increase, I think there's more long-time Zwifters who have their subscription paused this summer than in years past. So, yeah, we might see level 1 to 10 go up to 20% in January, but we also might find that the number of veteran Zwifters swells during that time too, because the number of Zwifters on the platform basically triples between now and January every year. So the percentages of Zwifters at each level maybe doesn't change much. It'd be interesting to see.
I'm glad they corrected us, because if it's, as the old saying goes, if it's too good to be true or too weird to be true, it's probably not true. Yes, I'm glad for the correction on that. But I also independently keep my numbers tracking of how Zwift is going. And I can report from the numbers that I hold here, the rolling, let me have a look here. The rolling 1 month, year on year, Zwift are a little down at the moment. On the week, they're still up. On the rolling 90 days, Zwift are well up. So overall, they're still growing. This is based on the independent numbers that I have that aren't sourced from Zwift. They're my own.
This is like some kind of Google search tracking thing, or secret source you're not prepared to reveal?
I may be checking how many concurrent users are logged in every now and then. By every now and then, I mean quite a lot. And with enough of those checks, you do get a nice trend. But I can report in the last 12 months, there has been Zwift growth and a lot more people. And from the graphs I'm seeing, which I can't show here on the podcast, people have stuck around a little longer. Let me look at the months here. January, February, March. There's more people online around then, but we're just about to enter the uptick. So we've gone through the desert at the moment. It's been repaved as well on Zwift, but we've gone through the low period. The seasons are changing, so I can't wait to see where that curve starts bouncing up. And there's a lot of cool stuff coming as well. So hopefully that bounces the numbers back up, but we'll see.
Right on.
How do you get to be a big, successful club on Zwift? Be more Sisu seems to be the answer. The Zwift Club runs rides and races virtually, has a super impressive website, amazing branding, and even runs IRL events. It's by any definition one of the most successful clubs on Zwift. How did they do it? Dave chatted to one of the founders, Matt Jansen, at home in Adelaide, Australia.
To talk about how Sisu rapidly became one of the more popular clubs on Zwift. It's a great story. I saw on your awesome website that it all goes back to WTRL number 123.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We started with 4 of us doing that first time trial, and now we have over 1,000 members, and it's from 60 countries. So what that has led to is that there's pathways, so that you can race in any grade. But the growth has just been incredible. It's really resonated with people globally.
So Matt, before we even talk about growing a team to 1,000 riders, you have to start somewhere. Let's talk about the very first impetus to even create the team.
Yeah, it was actually through COVID, and I was watching a lot of racing on YouTube, and I thought, well, how do we be part of this amazing series, the time trial? What? This is amazing. And we didn't know how to do it and what team to join. So we thought, well, let's just create a team. Really interesting. The course was Road to Ruins. And I think back now and think, well, it's been, it hasn't been a road to ruins. It's been an amazing journey. So it was just such a great experience, and to see it grow from 4 of us. And Miguel actually joined us at 2 a.m. in Europe to be our 4th rider. And the growth has just been incredible.
With 60 nations represented and 1,000 members, that's more than a club, Matt. That's a movement for sure. So let's talk about Sisu, what it means, where it came from. This is one of the best stories on Zwift, as I was saying.
Yeah, it's a Finnish concept, a social concept that really refers to determination, courage, and resilience. And I, even though I'm Australian, I just thought of it's a concept, it's a spirit. And when you ride your bike, you need all of those things, don't you? You need determination. You need courage.
When you talk about the spirit of Sisu, this community and the team and club that you created brings it all together, doesn't it?
And I'd linked into that in my personal life around, a concept that just, keeps you courageous, keeps you resolute, and keeps you determined. So I thought, well, with a race team, you need that. And I just thought it would resonate because it's a spirit, and we all need it in life, and we need it on the bike.
I love that Valtteri Bottas, the F1 driver, is well aware of Sisu. He's talked about it. You've actually gone and done the ride up in Finland. That must have been an incredible experience.
Yeah, we actually rode, Dave, in Finland gravel and Rattle gravel, which was here in Adelaide, and we actually did a training ride off the route here in Rattle Gravel, and Valtteri was there. So, that's how he knows about it, and it was pretty cool.
How hard has it been, Matt, scaling up?
Did we set out to have 1,000 members from 60 countries? We didn't. We got on forums to find a couple of people to form that first team. And then from there we went, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly. And that's when we engaged a brand expert to develop our brand. That's where we developed a vision, a strategy, an objective, what would make us unique. And it all came back to that spirit. It's the spirit of Sisu. And what we have now is built a community that's connected, and their actual athletic performance is improving, day by day.
I remember while we were doing e-racing coverage on ZCL, the moment that you got in-game kit for Sisu. What a moment that was. I would imagine huge for the club.
I have some happy tears now, Dave, talking about it. We rode with the Vintage 2 kit to start with, and then when our kit came live, to actually have those kit unlocked rides and seeing your own kit in the game was just incredible. And then when we launched the in real life kits, we've got pictures of people getting matchy with their avatar, and they're in a full Sisu kit. It just resonated so well.
Well, it's been great having you with us, Matt. And before we wrap things up, I know that the Sisu Tour is going on right now as we record this. Can we talk a little bit about that and why it was important for Sisu to not only race, but to create events?
Yeah, well, when creating the team, we didn't want to just be riding in the kit in-game ourselves. We wanted to hold and host events and race series that actually add to the vibrancy of the racing scene. So what we did is create, we've had Sisu and a time trial. We've had other series, but the biggest is the annual Sisu Tour, which we hold during the men's Tour de France. And that's on now with nearly 2,000 people. It's the most popular series on Zwift right now, and it's just going really well. There's 7 stages, and we match the route to the parcours of the Tour de France. So when the real athletes in real life are going up a mountain, we go up a mountain on Zwift. When they're doing an individual time trial like they are in the final stage of the Tour de France, the Sisu Tour wraps up with an individual time trial, and that's just been incredible. Just really amazing to see the growth of that. We've got a leader's jersey, a sprinter's jersey, and a mountain goat for the climbers. So it's been an amazing experience.
Well, it's been an amazing experience having you join us as well, Matt. So thanks a lot for your time from Australia. So that's Matt Jansen, everyone, Club Sisu, and you can find them at Sisu, SISU, .racing.
Dave, they've got it right, haven't they?
Without any doubt, Matt is his energy really is what my biggest takeaway was. He's a super kind person, and I think he embodies really what the spirit of a Zwift club is all about. Simon, the reason I really wanted to talk to him was try to create some positive role modeling in that world for folks maybe that are wondering about starting their own club. And leading with kindness, as Matt does, is probably a pretty good way to start.
Eric, owner and operator of the Zwift Insider Club, what's it like? Does it take a ton of time? You constantly at the beck and call of members, or does it sort of run itself?
It doesn't take me much time at all, but Zwift Insider isn't your typical cycling club either. Sisu is like they're more like a real world cycling club that's been virtualized in a lot of ways, and Matt's doing a lot more work than I am. He's built a community, but Zwift Insiders Club on Zwift is really just kind of a container for Zwift's. For Zwift Insiders events like our tiny races. So my club is really big, but it's also really basic. I've toyed with the idea of creating a Zwift Insider race team and holding group rides and stuff like that, but I don't think that's what I'm really supposed to be doing right now, because there's plenty of great teams out there like Sisu who are doing good work, and I'd rather just support them.
Yeah. Nathan, you ever thought of having a club?
I like supporting clubs and organizers because Matt is a hero, and I don't know, like, I guess I want to be a hero just in different ways, like, because that's a lot. They do a lot of really, really, really good work, and the thing is that also I think I've gotten pulled in like so many different directions in supporting the event organizers and the clubs as much as I possibly can, that it was a weird interest space. I never really thought about it this way, but I think that it was, now that you ask me, I'm like, why did that never really, it was like, oh, because you're pulled. Yeah, because you've been pulled in so many different directions in interest in other people's clubs and doing everything you can for their clubs. You know what I mean? For their organizations and their teams, and focused on them. So then it would just become a distraction in some ways for me to try and grow. Because we were one of the original teams, Vision, right? Vision Cycling was one of the original kits in game, all that kind of stuff. But then as my focus became about supporting those clubs and stuff, I think it just kind of took a back seat. And other people actually took over those roles for some of those things that I'd started. So yeah, that's why. I think that's pretty much why, as we realize that live here.
Yeah, you're saying pretty much the same thing as Eric, really. In that there's lots of other clubs doing the stuff that you might do. So why would you need to do it? We are interested on the Zwiftcast in hearing from people who run big successful clubs and how they do it. We're not just singling out Sisu, although it's good to single out such a successful operation. So if you run a club and there's something special about it, get in touch with us, and we will look at whether it might be a good idea to feature you. Okay, that's another Zwiftcast done and dusted. We'll be back on a regular cadence now after our summer break. 2 big highlights coming up in the next weeks. Zwift will announce their This Season on Zwift event thingy, where they traditionally take the wrapping paper off lots and lots and lots of lovely shiny things to come in the quite near future. And sometime in the autumn, we'll be celebrating Zwift's 10th birthday. I know, 10 years. Time flies when you're having fun and not riding a trombone. Thanks for listening. See you next time. This is the bit where we say thanks very much to Zwift. Thanks, Zwift, for supporting the Zwiftcast. And we also like to remind listeners that we decide what goes into the podcast, not Zwift. Thanks for listening.